This is Haley DiPietro Antonio with my interview project with Mr. Jack Dempsey. So, where are you from?
Where am I from? Originally from Medford, a long time ago. And moved out of the city for a while, and now I teach here and I coach. And I don't live in the city any longer, but I'm here all the time.
What is your current occupation?
Occupation?
And how did you end up here?
Okay. Obviously, I'm a video production, digital media teacher, and that's my basic position, but I also coach girls indoor track and varsity softball. But the story goes like this. Back in the 1980s, early 80s, I was in business for myself. I owned a video store, and I also had a sporting goods store at the same time. Sold the sporting goods store, went into the video store, which was in Haynes Square, Medford. It's called Action Video. And what we did, this was when the initial renting of movies came available, and we used to rent movies. And somehow we learned, my brother, who was a partner of mine, and friends, learned the art of videotaping. We kind of learned it not from going to school for it, but we learned it from basically the street, because we were involved in a lot of sports, videotaped the different sporting events, particularly road running at the time, which was tied into my running store. And things from there just kind of led to where I am right now.
Could you go over the whole process of how and what you did to construct these interviews with the World War II veterans of Medford?
Okay, before I talk about that, let me continue on with how I got involved in this, so you have a little bit of history on the video end of it. Okay, so we had the video store, and what we did, we were the first, this is Action Video Services, we out of Medford. We were the first, one of the first companies in the country that actually videotaped road races, professional road races. And I got involved in that because I had a running background in high school and in college, and I was involved in the running store with Dave McGilvey, who's the race director for the Boston Marathon, and also the youngest person ever to run across the country. So I videotaped his events starting in the early 80s. He, like I said, he ran all over the country, and in one of the events that he ran in, he ran up the Empire State Building. It was one of the first race that ever went up the Empire State Building. I was videotaping him from the bottom, the stairs, went in the elevator, went up the top, and he's looping around. Quite a historic event at the time. We also started out getting local road races. Joan Benoit Samuelson, who won the 1984 Olympic Games in the marathon, videotaped her running the Bonnie Bell 10K, my company, Action Video, where she broke the world record in the 10K, running 22 minutes and 30 seconds. And we were doing that. No one else around was doing it. We videotaped the Freedom Trail road race, which had Olympians running in it. This guy, Rod Dixon, who finished third in the 1,500 meters. And we had all this video. We gave it to the company that was sponsoring them. And we just continued on doing road races. And then it got into weddings. I started videotaping weddings along with the movie rental business. And so we were incredibly busy for about 7 or 8 years doing different events, anniversaries, sporting events. We did everything, football games. And so one thing led to the next. Went into the early 90s, and I was friendly with Mr. Trotter since we were kids, played sports together. Business started going down. We had some competition. Blockbuster Video came in, kind of really hurt us. We tried to make it go with Dempsey's Muffins, a muffin store, along with the video store in Haynes Square. And what happened there was Dunkin' Donuts came in. So we were doing very well, but in the meantime, I kept my hand in videotaping sporting events and staying active with the weddings and so forth. So business kind of went south, and times weren't good. Mr. Trotter came by, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Dad, I'd love to," he asked me would I want to substitute and help out in the video department at the high school. This is a little over 20 years ago, 22 years ago. And so at the time, Mr. Polcari, who was the video and teacher here, became a submaster, and I came in, subbed for a year, and next thing you know, I was the video teacher. So that involved a number of things, all the school activities, but at the time, when I first started, it was a lot of students, 25 students to a class, and it was really hard to focus on individual stuff. But so from that point on, I started videotaping school events with all the kids, continued doing the sporting events, football games, and the mayor asked me to videotape a bunch of the city events. And the city events included, obviously, his inaugurations, and did a ton of dedications to different World War II heroes, and for different people who really contributed to the city of Medford. Did maybe 100 of those events. So as we were going along back in 2007, I believe, a man named Tom Convey, who was instrumental in the city. He was a guidance counselor here. He was back in the day, he was a World War II veteran, a Korea veteran, and also Vietnam veteran. And he's the historical person of the city. He was really famous for putting on events. He established the Hall of Fame here at Medford High School, as well as he contributed to some of the major events related to World War II. Major parade, the 375th anniversary of the Battle of Lexington and Concord. I believe that was it, but I have to confirm that. But there was a mega parade here, and it involved the Black Hawk helicopters coming down, and you had people from Washington and the state senators and congressmen, and it was a tribute to the World War II veterans, basically. But it also was the anniversary of the city. I believe it was 375 years. So they kind of combined everything. So one thing led to the next, and then in 2007, Mr. Convey asked me if I would be available to videotape interviews with World War II veterans. And he was a World War II veteran. He was the person who was involved in all the historic events of the city, major historic events. So what he did, he worked it out with the superintendent, the headmaster, and myself, and Mr. Trotter, who was my boss. And I ended up videotaping over 100 World War II veterans and their experiences. He would interview them just like we are right now, and he would interview them and have a series of questions to ask them over a period of, I don't know, maybe a year or two. Would come in here to do interviews, go at their locations, their homes, whether it was some of them were still working. There was one man who was 90 years old. He was still working as a lawyer, an attorney. Went to his office, interviewed him, and not only did we interview him, I think he had 7 or 8 brothers that were in World War II. So the reason Mr. Convey wanted to save all these interviews, get the stories of these people who were the greatest generation, they were called. And because of these people, we probably wouldn't be here today. City of Medford, just to give you a little bit of historical facts, back in the day when Pearl Harbor happened, 10,000 Medford citizens signed up for the war. There were lines at City Hall waiting for them, men, women. 20% of the population of Medford actually were involved in that war, which was the highest percentage in the country. Okay, and of these people that we interviewed, many of them were included there. So you probably have a question or two for me. You want me to keep going? I mean,
you can keep going.
Because you're going to edit this and use it, right? Okay, so now this man Tom Convey said we want to archive the historical records of these people, and so when we interviewed them, he interviewed them like I said, but I did the videotape and set up all the video audio stuff. We would have 1 or 2 or 3 of them at a time come in, and these, for the most part, I'd say 90% of these people who were involved in the war never talked about it, never spoke to their family about it. As what I experienced watching this was a bunch of people who were afraid to talk about it because of the experiences. They didn't want their kids to know what was involved, what they did, how incredible and how amazing these people were in situations in prison camps and flying planes and battles. And I mean, there were times, a number of times I was crying. Tears came to my eyes listening to the stories of these people, who incidentally, I'd say of the 100 people we interviewed, at least 60 or 70% of them are dead now, because this is what Mr. Convey wanted to do. He also passed away 2 years ago. And to his credit, we put this together, and I just helped him videotape getting all the stories of these people, and then he kind of promoted it throughout the city, throughout the country, through the congressmen and the senators of that represent this area, and we got the events to be sent to the Library of Congress. All this stuff is archived in the Library of Congress, which is a tremendous feat, tremendous historical achievement. And by doing this, I was kind of the beneficiary in some ways, but they had a special day where they had at City Hall for me, including local mayors and congressmen and Congressman Markey and state senators Donato, and they had a day where they'd given me it was a surprise basically, all kinds of recognition and plaques and keys to the city for this achievement, because and I just was volunteering. I just said that, I was going to help out. It wasn't a big deal as far as my time commitment to it, but as it turned out, it was a tremendous for the city of Medford and the school system and the mayor and everyone looked up to this, and I'm sure this video has been seen. Videos of these interviews have been seen at a number of spots, and there's so much more that was involved in it. Okay, we're going to stop here because you might have a question or two. Oh, I can keep going on.
You can keep going.
Okay.
I have other questions that
Okay.
I can ask.
Okay. Some of the questions.
What made you want to videotape these interviews with the World War II veterans?
Well, Mr. Convey, who was an icon in the city of Medford, Historical Society and guidance counselor here, was involved in the 3 wars himself. He asked me, because he knew I was the video person at the high school, if I would volunteer to help him put this project together. And I said, definitely, without a doubt. These people are heroes. These people they're the reason we're here today. And after doing it, wow, I'm so proud and thankful that he asked me to help him out.
What was something you learned from their experiences that impacted you the most?
A few things were, and this includes my father-in-law, who was in World War II. They didn't talk about it. They were afraid to talk about it because they were just what they saw, what most of them saw and went through, was stunning. And I know he never. And you'll hear this from a lot of people whose fathers, older brothers or whatever, were in wars. They don't like talking about it. And to me, that was kind of moving, but it was also kind of stunning to me. Like now I understand why they didn't talk about it, because of their experiences.
Who was also involved in the making of these interviews?
Basically, the World War II participants, Mr. Convey and myself, and that was it. I mean, I did all the videotape and the audio, all the editing, and put everything together, and that's basically it.
Where did you film your interviews?
All over the place. In the school, at homes. We went to a couple of businesses. Like I said, the one man was 90 years old. He was still working as an attorney. Out different locations, maybe at like one of the parks in the city, like a Hickey Park, I believe. We did one of the interviews there with one of the participants. But for the most part, there were like 2 or 3 of them together. Try to get groups of them together because it's hard doing individual ones.
Mm-hmm. Explain how your interviews were accepted into the Library of Congress.
Because of history, historical events recorded. These people had stories that were very interesting to our American history, and to me I was more concerned with the quality of the video. I didn't know if they were looking for like TV type quality with in studio shooting and stuff like that, but they were more concerned, at least the Library of Congress people, with the content, which was basically historical.
What did you receive in honor of your works?
No, they just had a special day for me at City Hall, where they presented me with the key to the city, bunch of recognition from the governor, the senators, state senators. They gave me all this, I don't know, these certificates and things, and a bunch of plaques, and that probably the greatest honor that I received was the American flag. The American flag all folded up, and I didn't understand when they gave it to me. You see it at funerals, military funerals and things like that, and I didn't understand the significance of it until afterwards, and they explained it, which people who get that flag, just to know the history of it, each one of those flags that is given to someone who's contributed to this country, whether it be a world war or a dedication or to the success of the country, each one of these flags, they fly every day. They fly this flag in Washington at the what do you call it, White House, and they take it down every day and they fold it up, and they save these to give to different people that have contributed to the country, and that was one that I got, which I thought was pretty amazing, and I felt incredibly thankful and like I'm really a part of this, and it was. I don't know, and they just gave me all kinds of recognition and newspapers, and it was a lot of good stuff that I didn't expect at all. I don't even know. I think this guy Tom Convey and maybe the mayor or whatever planned it, but I guess they just appreciated what I did, which was pretty cool.
Who are some interesting people you got to meet in your makings of these interviews?
I'll just tell like maybe 2 or 3 short stories and people that were interviewed, and one was Mayor McGlynn's father and his mother. They were both involved in the war. Matter of fact, they probably have their pictures. There they are right here. They were, to me, they were idols and incredible people that contributed to the city of Medford over the years. Mayor McGlynn, unfortunately, they both passed away recently. They're both in their 90s. Mrs. McGlynn, she worked on the side where they were helping out, making equipment. Women really weren't involved in the actual battles. But Mr. McGlynn had this story, and this was the first time this story was told. Since then, it's been made a movie. It's been on PBS. It's been on, I believe they made a regular movie for HBO on it. And he was what they called the captain, a major or whatever, of the Ghost Brigade. No one ever heard about this until this day. I remember his son Mike talking to me saying, when I told him the story, he said, "What?" He said, "My father never talked about anything about World War II." The Ghost Brigade were a battle unit that supported other, I guess you call them, another word for this is what they did anyway, and I'll think of the word in a minute. But they would go, say they were in Germany, and one of the platoons was with their tanks and aircraft carriers and everything, and all the soldiers, maybe 1,000 soldiers, would be in one section, and they had their responsibilities. They had to go out and fight, whatever their business was for their group or platoon. And what Mr. McGlynn did, he was in charge of the Ghost Brigade, and they had a similar platoon with 1,000 people, tanks, not aircraft guns, but anti-aircraft guns, all that kind of stuff. The problem was they were fake. They used all like rubber tanks and stuff, but they had this music, you'd hear the sounds of guns going off and tanks and cars, trucks and stuff, and it was all like on a PA system. So when the
Was there any stories or people that inspired you?
Yeah, there were a number of stories that people inspired me, and really some moving stories by a number of these World War II veterans. One of them was Mayor McGlynn's father. Then again, I guess I can call him Mayor McGlynn too, because he was Mayor McGlynn back in the 60s, before his son became Mayor McGlynn for 30 years. So when he was over in Germany, I believe, he was the I guess probably the leader, whether he was the captain, major, or whatever of the Ghost Brigade, which no one knew about at the time. And what it was, he was in charge of a platoon of soldiers, which was a whole battalion of tanks and anti-aircraft guns and all this kind of stuff, maybe 1,000 people and 1,000 soldiers. And what he would do, it was fake. The tanks were rubber, regular size. Tanks were rubber, the guns were all rubber, and they had this tremendous audio system, speaker system, that they would go into Germany and they would work with other platoons along the way, so they would confuse the opposition, thinking that there were two platoons instead of one or three. There would be an extra one, and they'd be blasting their music, and while the enemy was doing their surveillance over them, they couldn't tell if they were real or not, and they never even thought about it. They would basically be flying over and checking out, and they'd be looking down, and they'd say, "We better not touch them, because they have reinforcements. They have basically two units to battle with." And as time went on, this recently, and we were the first ones when we interviewed him to find out about it. It was never told to anyone. Don't forget, this is 10 years ago that we did these interviews. And since then, they've made a movie of it, a PBS movie called The Ghost Brigade, and he was like instrumental in that movie. And he is like, he got recognized in the movie, but they didn't give names or anything. But that was a pretty amazing story when you think about it. Without them, the other platoons probably would have been attacked or bombed or whatever they do as far as in the battle, in the heat of the battle. So that was one story. But another story was another man in Medford, where I don't know where they were. I'm just going to say Germany for now. And this particular general or whatever, they were pulling up with their big convoy, and they had to stop. These soldiers stopped them in front of them, and they just had to check their credentials, see who they were. And so the person, this is kind of funny in a way. This is a good one. The person in charge of the roadblock or whatever had to check their credentials, and so the two soldiers met, the general and the other man, and they obviously were both Americans, and they're saying, "Okay, so what's your platoon?" And the guy, they were looking at each other, and the guy who was checking them out said, "Did you ever go to Lakash's restaurant?" He recognized him, and he realized they're here in Germany, and these two guys were neighbors, and I mean, in the story, and I think of the odds of that. They're in a war, World War II, and they're on the other side of the world, and they pull up to each other, and they're looking at each other, and then they kind of were joking around, and obviously things worked out from then. But when you hear stories like that, that just shows you the number of soldiers and the 20% of the population of Medford that were in the war, that were in World War II. We were really involved in that war. And then on a sad note, there were a couple of other, there's a lot of stories, but one soldier who was talking about, he was doing these flyovers a number of times, dropping off materials for the Allied forces, and I guess his last trip they were shot down, and he was basically, I don't know, parachuted out of the plane or whatever, and was captured by the Germans, and he was a prisoner of war for over 2 years, and it was just very, very ugly and sad, the stories they tell you about. But once again, someone, he never talked about it until we did these interviews. And there was another really sad story. And I believe these people I'm talking about right now, they've all, in the last 5 or 6, 7 years, and are no longer with us. They'll all be in their 90s now. But this other man, and he's telling a story, and he was breaking down. He was crying, and it was like really emotional, the story he's telling us. He was in this big aircraft carrier, and his job was, he was down in the bowels of the ship, and he never really got to see the daylight. So he would be working whatever he was doing. There may be, I think there were probably like 1,000 soldiers in the ship. And this one time, he got access to going up to see what was going on, and it was at night. Thought it was kind of quiet, and he said, and this is really sad. This is was tough to take. As he got up to the deck, he bumped into something, and he realized it was a stack of American soldiers dead. They were stacking. This aircraft carrier was picking them out of the ocean where they were shot down or whatever. And I guess they'd take the dead bodies and they'd have to do something with them. So whatever. But he wasn't aware of this, and he was just like totally blown away. And it was like, wow, whatever these guys went through. So American soldiers had to go out in their boats and pick up the dead bodies and stuff. And I mean, there were a number of stories like that, but never, once again, he never talked about it. And it was sad. It was really sad. And listening to these stories, I don't know what to tell you, as far as whatever these men and women went through. But I mean, there were some other stories. I mean, not everyone was involved in the war rather, but the women, for the most part, they weren't allowed to fight at the time, and they were more on the home base, working with the munitions and secretarial stuff, and just doing all those kind of things. Not that they didn't want to be in there, because the women were all signing up too. I'm telling you that the way I understand it and how this city has been involved over the years back in World War I as well, World War II, Korean War, the Vietnam War. Medford citizens have been incredible. Incredible. And that's why if you go to the front of the school on Winthrop Street and you see the memorial of all the soldiers, how many are there, it's amazing compared to any other city. But that was just some of the stories.
Okay, thank you. These questions are more research related. So,
Okay.
Alvin K. Dixon is a World War II veteran that was called to recapture Europe. An officer in the 11th Armored Division, Dixon was awarded a Bronze Star for his valor at the Battle of the Bulge. Did you encounter with any awarded veterans, and what did you learn from them?
They're all different stories. All the battles, to me, just all came together. The particular battles, they didn't talk about any particular battles, but there was one soldier who talked about the battle in Normandy when they were on the incoming boats, ships, or whatever, and they had to jump out of the boats, and they were being shot at, and they had to go onto the land and get involved in the big battle, and just the stories. They didn't really get into depth with it, but you can imagine what the heck these guys were going through. But that particular one, I don't think, no, not really.
That's okay. The Library of Congress is the collection of more than 164 million items, which includes more than 38.6 million catalog books and other print materials in 470 languages, more than 70 million manuscripts, the largest rare book collection in North America, and the world's largest collection of legal materials, films, maps, sheet music, sound recordings. How does it feel to have your video works in this history library? Do you think your works have inspired others to try and get their works in the Library of Congress?
To me, it's an honor and a thrill to be able to realize that the work you did and you were involved in the Library of Congress for such a tremendous a tremendous city involvement in knowing that you're part of that. I don't know. It's fantastic. As far as the materials and being in there with all these other historians and who has seen the actual videos that I took in the interviews, I have no idea how many people have seen it. I know we had it on Channel 15 in Medford, the various interviews, and it's probably online somewhere now, but this is going back like 10 years ago. And I'm sure tons of people have seen it. And even requests I got from a lot of the families. We made DVD copies, and they were given out. Hundreds of copies have been given out to families and relatives and things. So, and in doing all that, I got a lot of tremendous positive feedback.
In the book Band of Brothers, it follows a company of men who grow very close together to the point where they consider themselves brothers. It says, "We know how to win wars, we must learn how to win peace." Were you emotionally impacted by any of the veterans' experiences and bonds? Did their stories teach you anything?
Basically, yeah, some of the stories I told you, but these people were incredibly tight, a unit. They were fighting for the same cause. I mean, there's the other countries as well that were fighting alongside of the U.S., but these people, I mean, they had no one else to turn to. You can picture yourself in a foxhole. You're in another country. You're battling. You don't know what's on the other side of the line. So they, in some ways, they had no choice to be really tight and close. But that's what it is. I mean, it's a team. The service people are amazing. I mean, you see it in everyday life. Not so much just the service people, but you know, the police, the medical people, just the marathon bombing, what that showed you right there, how everyone just came together. They didn't turn back and run away from the situation. They all jumped in, and I mean, if you really followed that, these kind of people are amazing. And soldiers, I mean, I have the highest regard for them. What I've seen, these people are truly amazing.
In the Library of Congress, the library reserves the right to select or reject any published work for its permanent collections based on the research needs of Congress, the nation's scholars, and the nation's libraries. What was the process of getting your works accepted? Wait, let me rephrase that.
Okay.
Was the process of getting your works accepted hard? What challenges did you face?
Actually, I faced no challenges because this man, Tom Convey, he was the World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War veteran. He was a school counselor here, and he is the one that was the impetus behind this whole effort. He's the one that, once we got all the interviews and all that kind of stuff together, I just did all the editing, put things together for him, and then he, whatever process it took, he had to go through Congress and through a number of top name city officials, state officials to get it done. And I'm not sure what it took, but I know it took an awful lot for it to finally get there and get recognized. But I know Congressman Markey was highly involved in it too. And anytime, you know, local people try to do stuff, you get the great support from the city and the town officials as well as your local state officials.
Okay, this is the last question. In the video, voices Voices of Remembrance, veterans of World War II describe their experiences. Veterans talk about their fighting in big events of World War II, such as the Normandy landings of D-Day and the historic Battle of Britain, when the country fought off the German attacks from the sky. In any of your listening experiences, did your interviewees talk about their experiences with major battles in World War II?
Well, the Normandy one, I think I just explained to you. And there was one other fella that explained. I guess they were in London, and every night for I don't know 6 months or whatever, London would be bombed. You know, the enemy would come over at a certain time, and the big sirens would go on, and all the people in the city would have to go underground into their foxholes and stuff like that. And I remember one of them talking about, they had a saying when they knew they were coming, and they'd jump in their foxholes. This particular man jumped in his foxhole, covered himself up, and laid in the foxhole for I don't know half an hour, every night for like 6 months. And they were getting bombed, and a lot of people were dying obviously, but they just hung in there, and that you can't imagine how that experience must be. And then coming home so many years later, what these poor people, what they went through, and how they never talk about it. They couldn't talk to their wives or their friends and stuff. They were just too blown away by it, but that experience, and then some of the other experiences that I told you about. But the prison of war experience, he didn't really go into detail. He mentioned some of the things they did, which were inhumane. It was horrible, and different battles. I don't know. There's just a lot of different things.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. You have any other questions? Like that, you can ask a question like.